Hi, my name is Jonas. I'm the CEO and co-founder of VenomAid Diagnostics, a company working towards transforming snakebite management one diagnosis at a time. Right now, we're located in Denmark, outside of Copenhagen, in a small place called Lyngby. At VenomAid, we're trying to solve one of the aspects of the global snakebite problem. Today, when you're bitten by a snake, and you have to get a diagnosis, the only hope is either one, to bring the snake that has just bitten you to the clinic, or hope that at the clinic that you will arrive at, there's enough experience in the clinical personnel present to actually look at your symptoms and translate them into a clinical syndrome from which you can get the treatment. The issue with this process is that it is too complicated. It puts a lot of the demands on the clinical personnel, and in many cases you simply don't have proper trained staff at the different clinics. What we want to do to simplify that is, let's take as an example with the COVID-19 quick tests, how we've basically seen a complete decentralization of diagnosis of a disease. If we can achieve the same thing within snakebite, so essentially our end game is enabling both you and me to perform the diagnosis, then as soon as you enter the clinic, you can get the matching treatment instead of having to wait additional hours, and through that also delaying the time from bite to treatment. The reason we set out on this journey is actually based from a research group that has originated at the Technical University in Denmark. There, the focus has been developing a better treatment for snake bites. So essentially bringing the antivenom that you're getting if you're bitten by a snake into the modern era of medicine. Me and all my co-founders had been heavily involved in a lot of research going on in that group during our studies. And through those projects, we basically also learned that aside from the treatment, which obviously also is in need of an overhaul, there was also the entire process of selecting a matching treatment when you're bitten by a snake. And when we actually started to dive into this aspect of the problem, we saw that you had so high demands for clinical personnel who had to have existing experience with diagnosing snakes, and that the correlation between symptoms was put directly to which snake would then be responsible for the bite. The issue is with this that a lot of snakes can have similar symptoms, and then it becomes a question of how many of snake A has the clinical personnel seen before, and then they'll most likely pick that snake. If we could completely remove all the complications in here and basically, create a product like a pregnancy test or the COVID-19 rapid test, then we would basically solve the first of the two problems that's currently present in snakebite. So it was actually quite easy for us to start off with this venture, because we had already a lot of insights into snakebite as a problem, working with antivenom, and I think luckily for us at least, with the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of focus has been steered towards diagnosis and basically preventing diseases. So we have two factors pulling a venture like us upwards right now, which is one, money is pouring into snakebite to actually finance bringing solutions into the modern era of biotechnology and medicine, and two, diagnostics is really getting a much larger focus thanks to the global pandemic. Essentially, our target market, especially the first types of market that we're looking at, will be regions or countries where you have a health system that has put snakebite on a priority list. One of those places for us is Brazil. So in Brazil, they've actually taken snakebite and declared it a national interest within health to solve that problem. And that means two really important things. One, the treatment, the antivenom, is basically being invested in from the government side. So you have treatment available almost at all clinics that can treat snakebite in Brazil. That's really important because when you get bitten, you need to treat as fast as possible. But secondly, what is actually driving this market to become even more interesting in our case is that they're also covering costs related to being treated for snakebite. And since snakebite is a disease of poverty and mainly affects the lower parts of society, then it's really important that we don't have an extra cost burden put on the patient side. So that means introducing a product like ours, which, you know, to get most value out of a diagnostic product, it's either preventing disease spread or it's getting treatment faster. And in our case, to get treatment faster, you need to have treatment available. And that is why Brazil is such a good place to start for us. They have the antivenom. They have already distribution channels to get that out, which we basically also expect to be able to piggyback on. So there's already an entire infrastructure and ecosystem, to say actually, which we can tap into with a product like this, and hopefully prove that a diagnostic test implemented in snakebite can reduce time from bite to treatment substantially, and with that improve patient outcome. If we look at competing solutions, I mean, the primary competitor is basically the current golden standard, which is the doctor's diagnosis. However, it's also important to mention that in Australia, they've actually succeeded with having a so-called snake venom detection kit created. So in Australia, they also have an equal focus from the government side to deal with snake bites, because they have some of the world's most venomous snakes. So this essentially means that you have Securus, which is partly their serum institute, you could call it, producing both antivenom but also producing this snake venom detection kit. However, when comparing to the solution that we're working towards, it's a bit tougher technology to implement outside of the clinical setting. It's a multi-step process. So by that, you would need more experience with handling their type of test compared to ours. There we once again have an extremely large advantage, as our product is almost one-to-one similar to the COVID-19 self-tests that we've seen being distributed to almost the entire of the world. But finally, their solution, so Secure Snake Venom Detection Kit, it utilizes the same technology that is being used to develop the antivenom. So essentially, they don't have as large a control over what recognizes what in the snake venom as we do, because we've basically revamped that process, and that gives us a product that, one, can be produced to reach a much better affordability range. Two, this is without compromising on the speed it takes to run the test. And three, because of our different way of basically developing the elements of our test that recognizes elements in the snake venom, we can also ensure a higher sort of security with using the test. So when you get a positive, it's not a false positive. And when you get a negative, it's not a false negative. The team combined brings more than 20 years of experience within snakebite research. So even though we're quite young team, we actually carry a lot of insights into the area that we're tackling. That's one thing. I would say another great advantage that we're bringing is also that we're not so deeply rooted in this area of research that we are too set in our ways, so to say. Sometimes the older and more conservative areas of research, they get the most innovation by bringing in people who are completely unfamiliar with how things are typically done. So what we are hoping to do is actually shake and stir up everything a little bit by challenging what is typically expected when talking about snakebite diagnosis, when talking about snakebite management, etc. I would say the final point about our team is that we also have an extremely experienced individual on the team called Andreas Lausen, who's also considered one of the pioneers within modern snakebite interventions, and has also been actually actively involved in WHO as an advisor on snakebite. So with that, we have a really good representation, both in terms of people who can actually develop this solution, people who can actually understand how to implement such a solution. So we also get the commercial side of things, and basically building a foundation for a future sustainable business. And then finally, through the current team that we also have a tremendous network of almost all key opinion leaders within the field of snakebite currently. So I mean, we're still quite early stage. We're a medtech startup, and medtech startups, they just have a really long cycle from idea to finished product. However, so far we've managed to raise just above $500,000, which we've used to finance the development of our until the current stage. Right now we're working towards basically having a product ready for clinical testing later this year. So that means we've already successfully achieved the proof of concept. We've already successfully had the first indications on clinical samples from the Brazilian Amazon. And now we're trying to sort of put together all those initial testing and results into optimizing a prototype which we can test clinically later this year. A really cool thing that happened recently was that we got another grant, which has enabled us to hire our first 2 employees outside of the founder circle. One of them is called Pelle. We actually onboarded yesterday as a research scientist, and then in June we're gonna welcome Dr. Georgina Ross, who will actually take up the role as a chief technology officer in VenomAid. So going forward, we will also look more, aside from just developing, the first product and getting that ready for market, we will also look a bit more on the technology side of things. Can we develop other platforms? Can we bring in other technologies that are more suited for diagnosis of snakebite? It's a quite special problem to be tackling, because you have a quite, I would say, varying setting for where these accidents happen, and where you also want to see a product like ours implemented. So that is one of the things that we're looking forward to now. The clinical testing, which we hopefully can reach later this year, is going to be a huge milestone for us to validate that everything we've put into the product so far, every thought, every decision made, has been the right ones. Definitely, our next challenge will definitely be the clinical testing that we're looking at. It's a huge endeavor to take on, especially when being located in Denmark and wanting to test the product in the Brazilian Amazon. Luckily for us, we've managed to also get good contacts and connections to different stakeholders in the Brazilian Amazon. So we have that settled. We have other players on ground in Brazil that are also very much believing in a product that we're trying to bring to market, and the potential that such product harbors. So we have good faith so far, but as every startup, you will inevitably meet some bumps on the road, and I wouldn't be too surprised if we're gonna run into some bumps with the clinical testing as well.